Betty and Joan are always talked about in the same breath, even though they only appeared in one picture together, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, is the way that they attacked their roles. They both dove in there with claws and grabbed hold of the material and startled their audiences by the fever of their pitch.
All right, Blanche Hudson, Miss Big Fat Movie Star.
The kinship between Bette Davis and Joan Crawford has to do with the lack of boundaries between who they were and who they played. They wore their lives on their sleeves, so to speak, while they were on screen.
It must have been a lot of fun for the public who knew Davis and Crawford from 30 years of stardom to see them finally paired. And it's kind of like the battle of Godzilla and Rodan. I've heard it said that Bette Davis was the screen's great sadist and Crawford was the screen's great masochist. So it really is a match made in heaven.
And so these two women who were similar in that they were super powerful, ultra-ambitious, fierce divas are still linked together because of that one film. It's really an amazing example of one film, to quite an extent, defining the image of both women.
Bette Davis used to say that she and Crawford had nothing in common. Now, of course, they actually had a number of things in common. They both were very strong women who had to fight against great odds for their stardom.
Then there's no other way. Not for us.
Joan Crawford's primary ambition was to be a dancer. She appeared in the chorus of several musicals, and it was as a chorus girl that she was discovered by an MGM executive and brought to Hollywood.
You like to dance?
More than anything in the world.
You want to work with me?
Yes, Mr. Gessler.
Jake.
Yes, sir.
Now beat it.
Thank you.
Our Dancing Daughters captured something that the entire country and maybe the world was fascinated by, the Flapper, the Charleston. When that happened and it was a success, MGM said, well, let's give Joan Crawford more movies, we'll give her more chances.
And she became a big favorite. It's kind of the embodiment of the new modern girl.
After Joan did Our Dancing Daughters, MGM gave her a long-term contract and increased her salary considerably.
She was paired with top MGM actors, and yet she was given big roles. She was the girl who wanted more out of life. She had zest.
I think the first lure was vulnerability. She had those huge eyes like Betty did, but she was always playing vulnerable, like she was able to be duped, and she was able to be a victim, which she later brought about in some of the later films to great impact.
I'm the chance of a lifetime, Janie. You better take me out.
Bette Davis came from the theater.
Suppose you've always loved the theater.
Betty was a wonderful success in an early show called Broken Dishes in New York.
She made some sort of success in that, and it was based on that she came to Hollywood.
Critics said she was made of lightning, and they were referring to this fantastic energy. And she was very proud of that energy that she had, which allowed her to go on and do the incredible things that she did.
Now, Bette Davis, of course, had been on the stage earlier, and she had a lot of drive right from the beginning.
When the lights go out and that curtain goes up, oh, Don, that's being alive. I love you for bringing me back to life.
And then she went to Universal.
Every time I think about it, I get butterflies in my stomach.
A lot of people would say, well, she was a lovely-looking woman or very attractive, but you wouldn't classify her as a classic beauty by any manner of means. So this bothered her.
Davis struggled very much when she first came to Hollywood as being thought of as drab and unglamorous.
They found her very odd-looking, especially those eyeballs. They commented on those prominent eyeballs.
Don't stand there with your eyes bulging out like that.
And they really didn't know what to do.
Rather cruel, aren't you?
George Arliss, who was a major figure on the screen at Warner Brothers and had been for several years, had seen her in a picture, and he decided that she would be right for his next vehicle, the man who would play God.
He took her under his wing and encouraged her and was a bit of a mentor.
He's put his faith in me, and I won't be a quitter.
George Arliss was the man Betty said played God to her. He was a wonderful actor of his time, and Betty was about to be dismissed, released. Her contract wasn't picked up, and she was on her way packing her clothes with her mother, and everything was over when George Arliss called her on the phone, and she was ever grateful.
You'll always be my idol.
I shall always be your friend.
And this led to a contract. And they put you in everything. But it was the studio's option, not the player.
MGM began to tailor roles for Joan Crawford right after the huge success of Our Dancing Daughters. When Joan married Douglas Fairbanks Jr., she definitely felt like she was marrying into Hollywood royalty. Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks were Hollywood royalty, about as royal as you could get. Mary never approved of Joan, and the marriage didn't last very long.
She learned a great deal. I think she later said that that's where she learned, which fork to use. And she became, the most pretentious great lady of them all. And much later, she laughed about it herself.
Did you mean that as an insult?
One of the fascinating things about Joan Crawford is how she changed her look over the years. And when she arrived in Hollywood, not unlike Greta Garbo, she was sort of unformed. She didn't have great teeth. She didn't have her signature eyebrows or her signature mouth. And at some point in the 30s, she started changing the look, and the eyebrows were getting bigger, and the mouth was getting wider. It's very possible that someone like Adrian was telling her, you need to get a look.
For 2 weeks, I'm a lady.
So she started growing not just the eyebrows and the lips, but also the shoulder pads, and it became iconic. It became a trademark for her. And after Mildred Pierce, Joan Crawford was really a brand name that she was selling like Pepsi. As Maria Callas said, you got to have a look, and she got one, and she stuck with it.
The same thing with Bette Davis. She already had the big eyes. She didn't need to do anything about her eyebrows, and she said on the stage that had been a huge asset, the big expressive eyes. And therefore, Bette Davis painted on the big lips to not make the eyes look so huge when she was on screen where everything is magnified. Now, Joan Crawford may or may not have been copying Betty's look to some degree with the big lips.
Betty didn't care what she looked like in a film. What she looked like depended upon the character.
She was a character actress. And to me, a character actress is what an actress is. But that was not really true for most actresses then, and is not really true for most actresses now.
Jack Warner really didn't know how to market women.
I don't care.
Warner Brothers was known for dramatic films, for gangster and real-life, almost documentary-style films. But Jack Warner kept ignoring her. He just saw women for what he saw, for their face and their figure.
Warner's never, before Bette Davis, never really had a top female star that was groomed by them.
So it was very hard for a woman to get movies with a strong female role.
You're a pretty smart girl.
So they tell me.
She really took the bull by the horns, and she was fighting for her own parts and, in essence, marketing herself.
She was not going to be the quiet little docile lady in the background saying, whatever you say, boss.
I made you rich. I put those smell clothes on your back. Now just because you got your neck washed, you think you're a gentleman.
Joan was being marketed by MGM. She was being marketed by their publicity machine. By the time that Bette Davis made her first film, Joan was already a firmly established star at MGM, having appeared in films with Clark Gable and, their up-and-coming stars. So she was definitely way ahead of Bette as far as the stardom stakes went. Joan Crawford and Clark Gable made a number of pictures together. They were considered very good box office when they paired them together. Probably the most famous of their teamings, probably their biggest audience pleaser, was Dancing Lady, which introduced a young Fred Astaire, and is one of the films that's associated with Joan dancing. But they have real chemistry in the film, and it's fun to see them play together.
Oh, it's you.
Grand Hotel really showed everybody in one of the first all-star films that was ever made in Hollywood, narrative films, that they were putting her on the same level with the Barrymores and Wallace Beery and Greta Garbo. She was getting equal billing to all of these top-flight stars, so it was really attention. Joan Crawford has come into her own here. She is as big a star as these people are.
I'm a little stenographer.
That's fascinating. I don't suppose you'd take some dictation from me sometime, would you?
It became a very popular formula for Joan Crawford. Girl from the wrong side of the tracks, from the sticks, makes good, becomes a prominent showgirl, shop girl, mannequin, you name it, something in the working girl's reach.
And I've been through the mill already. Why, I've worked in cheap vaudeville, one-night stands, honky-tonk.
So that was how she really attracted a mass audience, because the audience related to her.
what's very interesting about Crawford is that she was able to adapt her image according to the current fashion, and she seemed to have a real gift for knowing when one period was ending and when to reinvent herself.
I'm going to start doing. I'm going up where it's art.
Betty was given, at the beginning, a lot of ingenues, but then when Betty started fighting and started getting the decent roles, they were all over the map. Betty Davis desperately wanted to do Somerset Maugham's Of Human Bondage, which would have meant a loan out to RKO.
That sort of thing doesn't mean anything to you.
That's what you think.
She wanted something on screen that would break her through, that would get her the attention she hadn't gotten so far playing dyed blonde characters. So she fought to get the role of Mildred.
And she basically went to war, pleading, kicking, screaming, and hounded him for months until finally he said, "Okay, Betty, go hang yourself."
You don't take me out, someone else will.
Well, she didn't hang herself with the role of Human Bondage. She got an Academy Award nomination, and she began to be noticed in Hollywood as an actress.
People were not expecting this range, this depth, and this ability to completely debase herself on screen.
What do you mean?
That certainly was a kind of a part of camp humor. It was a kind of bitchy sort of insult humor. And she certainly was kind of the movie's first kind of bitchy star. I don't think anyone before Of Human Bondage ever took such relish in wiping the screen with her leading man.
And after you kiss me, I always used to wipe my mouth. Wipe my mouth!
Betty was willing to do anything at any time. I mean, she would have put on a hairsuit and played a werewolf if it was a good role.
You're no longer important to me. Your importance ended when the show closed.
She wanted to build, and she did, a gallery of unforgettable characters.
She was an actress, not with a capital A. Every single word's capitalized. Bette Davis was an actress, and she played the role her whole life.
Joan played the star 24/7. Joan was always dressed to the nines, even if she had to go to the convenience store. She once said, if you want to see the girl next door, then go next door.
Joan Crawford really had a lifelong mission to be taken seriously.
Aren't you going to kiss me?
And yet she was sort of ambivalent because she also wanted to be maintain this certain glamorous facade, but she wanted to be taken seriously as an actress.
Oh, you. Get her out of here.
Wait a minute, boss.
Steve, I haven't got time to
She's got
waste.
plenty of talent. Listen to me. Just watch her once, will you, please?
All right, all right. Let's see what you can do.
I find something very infinitely touching about this woman who came up from terrible adversity and created this extraordinary image of Joan Crawford and maintained it with such discipline and drive. And in every one of her movies or TV appearances, she's always going for that Oscar.
I'm like that guy throwing quarters in the slot machine. I keep on trying.
Instead of giving in, she did just the opposite and did what she had to and made a career.
Well, what do you find so amusing?
What do you find so disturbing?
When Betty won her first Oscar for Dangerous, she showed up at the Academy Awards to accept her award, dressed in a little house dress, looking like what Carl Laemmle referred to her as a little brown wren.
There was a little bit of a kind of a, the hell with you attitude that she was rejecting the star system. Bette Davis was, in a sense, the first rebel actress.
When she won her second Academy Award for Jezebel, she came to the awards more suitably attired.
Saucy, isn't it? And vulgar. Yes, isn't it?
Jezebel was a very important film for Davis in 1938. They really started truly creating women's pictures for her with big budgets. It was an enormous success.
I give you a toast to the firm of Dillard & Sons, a venerable institution, a financial colossus with branches in New York, Boston, London, and Paris.
Bette Davis was notorious for fighting for the roles that she wanted, for going on suspension, for not doing roles that she deemed unworthy of her, for leaving the studio on strike, thinking she was going to get punished, and every time she did it, things happened that made it better and better until finally, approaching the end of the 30s, she was tops.
How cozy.
After Joan Crawford married Franchot Tone, her second husband, she wanted to change the shop girl image and try the kind of roles Bette Davis was doing in the late 30s. However, it didn't work for Joan Crawford. Her fans were used to seeing her in that rags to riches formula. They didn't want to see her at all unsympathetic or playing too strong a woman yet. But she was changing, she was aging, she was moving into it.
You got to kick and punch and belt your way up, because nobody's going to give you a lift.
Joan Crawford was very driven. She was so determined to prove that she was not just a clothes horse, not just a glamour girl.
Why shouldn't I stay as I am, on top, with these clothes, these people, this life? Am I any different from them? Do I act any different? No, Annie. But you are. I'm not. And I'll prove it to you I'm not.
She heard about the film of the women being made from Claire Booth Luce's play. She read the script, and she saw there was a supporting role of Crystal, who's the great villain of the piece, who's just the bitch to end all bitches.
And by the way, there's a name for you ladies, but it isn't used in high society, outside of a kennel.
And she was determined to play that part, and Louis B. Mayer, the head of the studio, was very much against it. So what on earth would possess you to want to play that role? And she said, I'd play Wally Beery's grandmother if it was a good part. She was willing to sacrifice glamour or sympathy just to prove that she was an actress.
I've worked too hard to land this meal ticket to make any false moves now.
Taking a supporting role in what was a top-line Norma Shearer picture, The Women, was quite a move for Joan. I think she wanted to get into some fireworks there, and she did.
What did you expect me to do? Burst into tears and beg you to forgive me? Isn't that what you really came in here for, Mrs. Haynes?
Not after seeing you. You're even more typical than I dared hope.
Well, honey, that goes double.
She virtually stole the film. She played the bad girl, and this may have been her first intimation that playing a bad girl, as had happened so often with Bette Davis, will get you more attention and more acclaim than playing a sweet thing.
It'll be out tomorrow, Mrs. Prowler. Fowler. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Fowler.
And from then on, Joan Crawford's image did harden.
Bette Davis did play a certain amount of heroines. I don't think she preferred those roles. I think she preferred her more outrageous parts and demanding roles. And she was one of those actresses that really loves looking as awful as she could. There's a certain kind of actress, there are very few of them, but who you can tell just sort of revels in looking hideous. So I think Bette Davis particularly enjoyed playing the latter scenes of Mr. Skeffington, where she suffers from diphtheria and all her hair falls out.
There are a lot worse things in this world than losing one's beauty.
And Bette Davis just broke the mold because she insisted on looking just like the person whose life she was portraying.
Joan was let out of her MGM contract. Was extremely upset about this. Once again, as Jack Warner was wont to do, he saw a saleable commodity on the open market, so he offered Joan Crawford a contract at like 1/3 her Metro salary, which Joan took.
She knew Bette to be the queen of the lot, and she made an effort to let Bette know that she wasn't really trying to usurp her position and try to befriend her, but she did what she often did, which was she overdid it.
She would leave flowers in her dressing room and little gifts, and, Bette Davis was like, what is this crap?
I don't want it.
Now, because Bette was the queen of the lot, she got first pick of all the properties that went through Warner's, and she was offered Mildred Pierce first, and she refused it. And Joan took the role and won an Oscar for it, so I think there's really the beginning of the rift between them.
Vita! Not on your life! I said give it to me!
Get out, Vita. Get your things out of this house right now before I throw them into the street and you with them. Get out before I kill you.
Mildred Pierce comes out. Big hit. And here was Joan Crawford, who couldn't get arrested before. Now she's suddenly, top of the world, Ma.
It was even more disturbing to Bette that as Bette's Warner Brothers career was winding down, Joan's was taking off.
I can't get you out of this, Vita.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Number, please. Give me the police department.
No.
After Mildred Pierce, Joan Crawford began playing the long-suffering victims of varying kinds.
And I didn't help her kill herself. I had nothing to do with it.
Here's to love. And here's to the time when we were little girls. No one asked us to marry.
If she had not been nominated and won for Mildred Pierce in 45, I believe she would have not only have been nominated for Possessed, which she was, but she would have won for this because it is her finest performance.
I told you once I'd do anything to keep you from leaving me, and I will. Anything.
Well, any jailbreak is pretty tough, but I think I can manage this one.
You'll see. I can be very objectionable.
That I can believe.
Betty's last film for Warner's is Beyond the Forest, and it's completely tied into her leaving Warner's early. In the middle of filming, she decided, I do not want this on my resume. I am not finishing this movie. And she said, I'll tell you what. I'll finish your movie. You let me out of my contract. She did, and they did.
And you can put that in your oil well and pump it.
When Bette Davis left Warner Brothers, she simply drove away, and she thought there would be a big party. She thought she would get a watch. She thought people would come out and say something to her. But actually, she drove away, and that was it.
I find all this very distasteful.
Bette Davis very much wanted to be the first performer to win 3 Academy Awards, and it looked like she might have the chance. She wanted it for Dark Victory, didn't get it. Then she made her huge comeback in All About Eve, and she really felt she would win. But she was up against another legendary performance, Gloria Swanson in her comeback, first movie to speak of since the silent era as Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard.
All About Eve put her back in the forefront of Hollywood actresses, and she may never have topped that, but she showed that she could do it. She showed that she could come back, and she never stopped.
Well, if you're a star, you don't stop being a star.
Joan Crawford definitely worked more steadily than Bette Davis did in the 50s. They both considered it a black period because they were not protected by a studio anymore.
So by the time Baby Jane came along, even though it was Grand Guignol, sort of a shocker, the kind of thing they wouldn't have considered 10 years before, they were starring roles. It would be distributed by Warner Brothers, and they jumped at the chance.
And Robert Aldrich had originally bought the property of Baby Jane and approached Crawford, and he said, well, you know, if I wanted to do this, we really need somebody like Bette Davis.
And apparently the deal was struck, but only if Bette Davis got to be the lead character and Joan Crawford played the character in the wheelchair.
He then had to find a studio to do it, and they were turned down everywhere.
Jack Warner didn't like the idea of Baby Jane because bringing these 2 women together to him was a big mistake.
You know, I always wanted everything to be nice, don't you?
Robert Aldrich saw the publicity advantage of bringing together these famed women who, with this big rivalry in one production, would get him all the publicity he needed to launch his picture.
Warner's 7 Arts decided to produce the film if it could be done on a very low budget.
How about $100? A week, of course.
Well, now the two were finally unleashed in the same ring.
You wouldn't be able to do these awful things to me if I weren't still in this chair.
But you are, Blanche. You are in that chair.
There was no feuding on the set. It was all off the set. They were total professionals.
You know, I always wanted everything to be nice, don't you?
There was a war of dominance between these two sort of alpha females. Ultimately, because she was the more versatile actress, Davis got the director on her side. And so I think Crawford began to feel more edged out, and it was a much better part.
They were out to get each other. A lot of times they worked really well together, but every once in a while some unprofessional behavior appeared on the scene out of both of them, which was really out of character. They seemed to bring it out in each other.
The performances for both of them in Baby Jane, I think, were basically reflective of their careers and the kind of actresses they were. Betty, just chewed the scenery and chewed the staircase and chewed every single thing that she could find. She went to extremes with her costumes. Both stars had costume and makeup and hair approval. In fact, Bette Davis was wearing a blonde wig in the movie that had been borrowed from the MGM wardrobe department and had been worn by Joan Crawford in an earlier movie, but Betty never knew that.
When Joan Crawford was shown the designs for the dresses that she was to wear in Baby Jane, she resisted because she wanted to look more glamorous. But Norma Koch, who was the costume designer, convinced Miss Crawford that her character would not wear glamorous costumes. After all, she's been in a wheelchair for many years. And then Crawford agreed that that's the way she should look. Nevertheless, she still wanted to wear falsies, so that at the end of the movie, when she's lying down on the beach, her breasts wouldn't naturally fall to the side the way any woman's would when they're lying down. And Bette Davis had to, at one point, fall on top of Joan Crawford, and these fake breasts were not falling down to the side of her body. They were sticking up, as Joan planned. And Betty said they feel like two footballs having to fall on top of them.
When I'm very bad and answer back and sass, then I'm Mama's little devil. And Papa says, I've got the brass.
This film totally transformed them. Of course, it also set them up on a cycle of horror suspense films that became more and more tawdry. Baby Jane was a huge surprise sleeper hit.
On its initial release, I think people were shocked that these two established stars, there they were together for the first time, abusing the hell out of each other, and moving an audience.
All this time we could have been friends.
Whatever Happened to Baby Jane really is on the short list of all-time great camp cult classics. First of all, it's the showdown of these two rather monstrous, great stars, and both women have, great gay followings. So it's the championship match. The film itself is so outrageous. It's kind of like the tacky daughter of Sunset Boulevard.
Baby Jane is a quality film with quality performances. It's much more than a horror film. It's a tragedy of Greek proportions. Joan plays her role straight, and she plays it for sympathy, and she gets it. Baby Jane, as played by Bette Davis, is played like an ancient drag queen. But also, there's something very, very sad there. She's almost retarded and stifled in her upbringing. She self-medicated herself into severe alcoholism, and she doesn't know reality from reality anymore. She still is, in her mind, a little girl. And she believes this, and you believe it from her.
Betty and Joan in this movie are really brave performers. They are abandoning their glamorous images and coming out as these shock queens. Betty got nominated for the Best Actress Oscar. Joan did not. But Joan managed to wangle herself into having the job of accepting the Oscar for Anne Bancroft in case Anne Bancroft won.
So, at the night of the awards, Bette Davis, again, so confident, she was right in the wings with her purse, ready to stride on stage when they said, and the winner is Bette Davis. Joan Crawford was also in the wings, and the winner is Anne Bancroft for The Miracle Worker. Joan Crawford looked at Bette Davis, smirked, supposedly said, "Excuse me, I have an Oscar to accept."
They just didn't love you enough.
Both of these women beat the odds in that they grew up in a very sexist industry where eventually male stars totally dominated. But these women extended their careers almost to their deaths, and until her death in the case of Bette Davis. They kept reinventing themselves. They did interesting projects. They took risks. They were really pioneers. They were strong women. And once they were of a certain age, they didn't look back.
I think that Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, and the reason we still love them, is because they had goals that they set out for, and they achieved them. And the goals were as simple as entertaining your audience. They entertain their audiences 50, 60 years after they've made pictures, just as much as they entertained them when they made them for contemporary audiences. Quality entertainment endures throughout the years, and both of them created a body of work that's not going to be forgotten.